If there is one company that should have failed in China, it would be Starbucks. The first Starbucks in China was opened in 1999 in Beijing. However, today they operate over 6,000 stores. China is infamous for being hard to gain a foothold in for international brands, especially for Starbucks' case, considering China is a nation of tea drinkers, and back then, barely anyone drank coffee in China. How did a coffee chain become such a huge success overseas, and how could this success be replicated by other companies coming to China? The inspiration for this video was this case study, Starbucks China, Managing Growth Through Innovation, published in the Harvard Business Review. I highly recommend reading it if you are further interested in Starbucks' story in China. The China in 1999 is a very different China than it is now. China's middle class was still almost non-existent, as the GDP per capita was just about $873 per year. Not many international brands operated in the country by then, and doing business in China was considered significantly more risky than nowadays. Coffee was very rare and tea was the preferred drink of many Chinese people. Doing business in China differs heavily from doing business in the US or Western European countries, especially back then in 1999. China offered great market potential, yet came with challenges on cultural and regulatory fronts. The business culture was strongly embedded in Chinese philosophy and related to Confucianism, Taoism, and military strategy texts such as The Art of War by Sun Tzu. One of the first principles foreigners noticed was something called guanxi. Guanxi refers to having personal trust and a strong relationship with someone, and can involve moral obligations and exchanging favors. Guanxi was developed over time and often over generations. It includes relations between individuals, businesses, and government. So how was Starbucks able to solve this problem with relationships? They solved it mainly through local partnerships, such as joint ventures, and partly by its early appearance in the market. Another different aspect from the West was the gifting and reciprocation in the business world back in the day. Depending on the circumstances, this can also include bribery, especially back in 1999, when government officials were far more corrupt. Recent government efforts have taken action to cut down on this phenomenon, like the campaign promise of Xi Jinping. But back in the day, bribery, or whatever you want to call it, was a common practice in many areas of the business. Aside from these cultural differences, there was considerable legislative discrepancies. Government policies and laws could change overnight, bringing any business down instantly, and can also affect the brand's global presence. One example of such a crackdown happening seemingly overnight was China's ban on private tutoring in July 2021. This meant the end for the multi-billion-dollar private education industry, almost overnight. Quality control was yet another major challenge, especially when trying to position yourself as a premium brand like Starbucks is trying to do. One infamous incident happened in 2008, when milk was tainted with melanin. This event opened the eyes of many companies and government regulatory bodies. The risk was especially great in the food and beverage industry, where even international giants fell victim to food scandals. On a corporate level, risks can also include larger problems like property theft and staff rotation. Starbucks has been managing all those challenges fairly successfully, but the bigger a company gets, the greater the risks of those hiccups become. But what did Starbucks do in China to overcome those challenges? Despite criticism, Starbucks marketing analysis revealed that the growing Chinese middle class was receptive to Western goods and practices. This was just what Starbucks required in order to be the pioneer in introducing coffee to China. If analysts of Starbucks determined that China would be an impenetrable market for coffee, they would have never even tried to enter the market in China. However, they saw a massive opportunity early on. By selecting strategic locations, Starbucks reduced the need for traditional advertising. Green tea was also introduced, which made it easier to attract new Starbucks and coffee drinkers. To cater to tea drinkers early on, the green tea frappuccino was introduced in 2002, and 2010 saw the introduction of 9 other varieties of Starbucks tea. Last but not least, it gave rise to the Starbucks experience, which at the time was associated with the Western experience. The three elements elevated Starbucks above its rivals. Starbucks consistently upheld its international standards. Starbucks maintained its higher prices while also maintaining quality, in contrast to many other international corporations that try to save costs by reducing criteria to compete with local enterprises. This spared them a race to the bottom in terms of prices. On top of this, Starbucks won numerous awards, including the 100 Trusted Brand Award or the Best Employer Award in China. To address the size and diversity of Greater China, Starbucks formed joint ventures with Beijing Maida Coffee, Taiwan's Uni-President, and Hong Kong's Maxim Caterers. These companies slashed the learning curve by bringing in their expertise. Starbucks also sources a lot of their coffee locally from Yunnan in China. Coffee production has grown significantly in China, as farmers found coffee to be more profitable than tea. Starbucks' decision to plan and fund employee recruitment and training initiatives was its best long-term commitment. Its employees would contribute to and enhance the entire Starbucks experience in return. Customer service is at the center of Starbucks' business strategy, not just in China, but around the world. This is, of course, according to Starbucks themselves. One of the most ingenious tricks which Starbucks pulled off is the so-called third place experience, according to an analyst. They managed to convince the world it was selling coffee in China. In reality, they rent out couches to make its millions. The reason for paying Starbucks a visit is often not just to grab a cup of coffee. Many go there to indulge in a place that is complementary to one's home or work, the so-called third place. Starbucks is a destination for human connection, meetings, dating, gathering with friends, or be oneself. This all fits nicely with the Chinese increasing desire for a place that makes them feel good in an ever more hectic world. Most of Starbucks customers are young, urban adults aged 18 to 42. Starbucks attracted upper-class and nouveau-rich individuals, frequenting places driven by Western, expensive and often higher quality blends of coffee. This snobbish element allows the first coffee drinkers to show off by appearing in a Western place, which was not affordable for regular inhabitants. Paradoxically, at the same time an anti-chain trend has been happening all around the world, favoring local mom-and-pop shops over multinational corporations. Anti-corporate sentiment is growing among certain population groups, and Starbucks has realized this from the start. Starbucks took great efforts as part of its debranding strategy, which was the removal of branded visual identifiers such as logos, fonts, company colors, in an effort to appear less corporate and more independent. They have even launched so-called stealth Starbucks, which in the long run prompted further opening of more shops that did not carry the Starbucks brand at all. The result is that Starbucks has been accused of stealing its neighbors' design, because they tried to fit into the local neighborhoods, as they tried to position themselves almost like an independent coffee house, which could not be further from the truth, of course, as they are the world's largest coffee chain. But coffee consumption is still considered low at the moment in China, as the average Chinese person consumes just about 6 cups of coffee per person per year. Americans drink on average 1.2 cups of coffee per day, or about 440 a year. However, this number of course was way lower back in the day in China. Recently, the market for coffee had grown significantly, especially for younger members of the population. In an effort to capture the Chinese market further, Starbucks invests heavily in large-scale projects. The CEO of Starbucks, Howard Schultz, said in an interview with CNBC that China will overtake the US as Starbucks' largest market by 2025. One of those large-scale projects is the Coffee Creative Park, which will be officially completed in Kunshan, China, later this year. This cost them so far 1.1 billion RMB, or about 159 million US dollars. During the next 3 years, the coffee chain will also invest about 1.5 billion RMB, or 210 million US dollars, to construct Starbucks China's first digital technology innovation center. These recent moves are likely a response to rising competition in China's booming coffee market. One of the most famous competitors being Luckin Coffee. Luckin went public on the Nasdaq in the US, but following a large accounting scandal, they were delisted from the exchange. They later filed for bankruptcy. However, they further operate on a large scale back in China and are now even bigger than ever. They operate over 6,500 stores in the mainland of China, which is more than Starbucks currently. Chinese coffee consumption is now growing by a staggering 30% every year, showcasing a more and more lucrative market. Starbucks has targets to reach 9,000 stores in China by 2025. Only time will tell whether they can keep up with this rapid growth or whether their growth will slow down in the face of increasing local and international competition.